When are you going to stop punishing the poor girl and take her back? She's suffered enough. She calls me, maybe once a week, and we always have the same discussion. She wants to know how you're doing, are you happy, and though you can hear the pain when she asks if you're dating, I tell her the truth, straight from your mouth, you refuse to see any woman socially until the day the ring comes off your finger. Mark tolerated it a few times before he got a little irritated. Susan, I admire you a great deal. If there was a category called ideal wife in the dictionary, it would show your face. But let me ask you something. You had a pretty good career when you married S, and he told me you worked for 6 more years before you quit and became a full-time mother. S had to face many of the same pressures Beverly faces now, but did he ever shut you out? Miss anniversaries? Dates that were important to you or your children? Did S ever once put his business before you and your family? Did he minimize your contributions to the relationship? Mark paused and waited. She finally admitted there had been maybe 3 times in their marriage when the job had to come first, but that he had felt so badly about them that he showered her and the children with affection for weeks afterwards. Well, I didn't have that experience. Her attitude was, suck it up, big boy, this is more important. I lost friends, relationships I'd had for years, victims to her career. I'm just now getting used to having friends again, to being able to accept invitations for little get-togethers, things that are simple and mundane to them but precious to me. They're not networking, per se, just hanging out and enjoying the company. I've got a house I love, a place to enjoy my hobbies. I even got to plan a little garden, something I've wanted to do for years. Does that mean I don't miss her? No. I remember the little things before she became important, the spur-of-the-moment trips to sightsee, which was code for making love in a strange bed, the conversations about life we used to have years ago when we actually shared a vision. I remember all that, but those memories are dim, and the ones fresh in my mind are of her egotism and arrogance. She was like a sports star that read her own press, believing every story. She wants me back? Why? Most importantly, Susan, if she wants me, why hasn't she come to me? She's still in queen mode, waiting for the errant knight to return. If she's not willing to put any effort into our almost dead marriage, what makes you think she wants it that bad? I haven't even received a phone call. Doesn't sound like she's all that heartbroken to me. In this case, Mamad needs to come to the mountain. Now, I love you both dearly, and your husband is my boss, but this is the last conversation we're having about Beverly. If you'll excuse me. He hadn't ranted or raved, but said everything in a calm, reasoned manner, but the message was there, leave it alone. S looked thoughtful, and Susan was red with embarrassment. She rose as he was leaving and surprised him with a hug. I'm sorry, Mark. I won't push you anymore, but you're wrong. She misses you terribly, and the truth is, she's afraid to talk to you. She doesn't really know what to say. And she's afraid you'll bite her head off. I'm going to call her in a bit and tell her about what you said, and you have my solemn word this will be the last time I involve myself. She grinned and kissed his cheek. Besides, you're doing too well in your job for me to rock the boat. I estimate your contributions have shaved at least 3 years off our retirement plans. Carry on. It never occurred to Mark that S was thinking about retiring. He was just over 50, but his daughter was due to start work in the near future, and popular rumor has it that as soon as he feels comfortable with her at the helm, he was going to sail away into the sunset. Mark had a fleeting thought of working with another Beverly and wondered if he could handle it. Once again, Beverly went home to an empty house, ate takeout, and pretended to watch television. She had escaped the axe, but it was a close thing. The chairman and 2 board members flew down unannounced, scaring the whole office. She was almost faint when they called her into the conference room. She felt like a schoolgirl in front of the principal. Their expressionless stares didn't bolster her self-confidence. After almost a minute, the senior board member spoke. All right, Beverly, tell us what happened, and more importantly, tell us why. Don't whitewash it or you'll be out of here so fast your head will spin. We've always trusted you to be honest. It would be a shame if we were to start doubting you now. It took a few pauses and a couple of crying breaks, but she got it out. She had nothing to lose, so she told them the truth. She had let her ego get the best of her, relied on people who didn't have the company's best interest at heart, and got played like a foolish schoolgirl. They seemed relieved when it was over and sympathetic. How are things on the home front? Have you kissed and made up yet? This started another round of tears. The chairman got a box of tissues and set them in front of Beverly. She mumbled her thanks as she blew her nose. No, and I doubt we're going to. I haven't talked to my husband in weeks. He's living in a new town with a new job, in a house he bought, and has no intentions of leaving. I've always liked Mark, reflected the chairman. It seems out of character for him to ignore your gestures of reconciliation. Beverly flamed red and told them she hadn't contacted him because she was ashamed and didn't know what to say. The chairman's tone softened. Well, there you go then. We may as well accept your resignation now. Two of the traits I admired most in you were your ability to analyze a problem and your tenacity in achieving your goals. Obviously, you don't want your husband back, and to be honest, someone who shows so much hesitation and indecision is not top management material. I mind the times, not that long ago, where the hounds of hell couldn't keep you from accomplishing your goals. His words stung, only the fact that he was right kept her from lashing out. He saw her face reddened and the sudden thrust of her jaw, and chuckled. Ah, there you are. I was beginning to think I'd lost you for good. Now listen closely. You're still on shaky ground here, Bill, Jack, and I are your only supporters right now, and we've gone out on a limb for you. Do not chop it off behind us. You still have your job, but don't look for a favorable review or a bonus this year. What you do have is a second chance. But hear us out before you sigh in relief. This division was headed for a crash, Beverly. We're aware of the South Koreans and their imminent threat. If we stay the course we're on now, we would be out of business in 3 years. It's one of the reasons we decided to sell this division off while it was still at the top. Your little gaffe brought that to a grinding halt. Between the suit and the snake you had trusted stabbing us all in the back, we're not nearly as desirable. The merger talks are history. What you need to do is figure out a way to reinvent the division, come up with products and services, and give it a viable future. I'm going to be as blunt as necessary here. Do it and redeem yourself, fail and you're out. We're giving you a year. His voice softened. It was the best we could do, Beverly. I know you'll make me proud, even if you fail, we have faith in you. She was so overwhelmed that a simple handshake wouldn't do, so she gave each a heartfelt hug, swearing she would give it everything she had. She hugged the chairman last, after the others had gone. He took her hands after they broke. I'm going to give you advice on something that has nothing to do with work. If you really want Mark back, you'll have to go to him. He'll never come to you because you've hurt his pride too badly. He holds the power now, child. He's got a good job, good friends, and a bright future. You're going to have to show him you want an equal partner, and you have to mean it. The first instance of backsliding, and it will be over. I really believe you forgot, but Mark is a pretty shrewd individual. He saw the writing on the wall for this division last year. We even had a brief talk about it the last time I was down, and he mentioned the South Korean company then, even had some ideas on how to rechannel our efforts to make us more viable in the market. I was impressed enough to tell him to discuss it with you. I have the feeling that discussion never took place. If it had, perhaps we wouldn't be having this talk now. Call me if you need resources, and if I think it's justified, I'll allocate them. Think about everything I said, business and private, and make good decisions. She left the conference room and went back to her office. Jin was hovering, and Beverly told her it was not all bad news, but that she needed some time to marshal her thoughts. She also asked Jin not to let anyone disturb her for the rest of the day. She locked herself in and thought about the most important goal in her life: how could she get Mark to love her again? The start was simple. With the help of Susan, Beverly cyber-stalked him, getting on his Facebook page and starting a conversation. She knew some of his hobbies from Susan and had bought an old car, slowly restoring it in his new garage. He posted every step, describing in detail what he was doing. He put out an appeal for a front bumper cover, and she scoured the websites. Money was no object if it got her back into his life. It would be worth every dime. The fates were with her because a man contacted her, showing the front end of the car. It was perfection, but the back was totally trashed thanks to a secret joyride by two of his great-nephews. When he found out how expensive it would be to restore, he parked it in a field and left it for 6 months. The interior was in excellent condition, and the front end gleamed like a new penny. Beverly bought it instantly, but not before bargaining him down almost $1,000. Hey, she was a master of negotiation when she remembered. Beverly planned her attack with precision, using Susan to help her. Mark was having a barbecue to show off his new gas grill and clay oven. It was mostly people from work along with a few of his neighbors. Susan asked casually if she could bring a friend, and he readily agreed. This better not blow up on us, she warned Beverly. If he gets really pissed, it would make it incredibly awkward between him and South. Of course, he has a bill in defense. He has no idea who my friend is, and I told him you were meeting us at his house, promising faithfully that if it started going bad, she would leave immediately. Beverly finished her plans. She must have changed outfits a dozen times before she realized it was just a cookout, and she should dress for comfort. She went for a really nice sundress in his favorite color, light blue. It stopped just above her knees, and quite a bit of leg would be showing when she sat down. He had always loved her legs. She used very minimal makeup, just wanting to highlight her eyes. She wore her hair loose, surprised at how long it had grown. She wore no jewelry except her engagement ring and wedding band, and a small diamond necklace he had bought her the first year they were together. Beverly was shaking a bit when she pulled into his drive. It was the first time she had seen the house, and she was surprised at how big it was. Why would an almost single man, childless, need such a big house? It gave off an air of old-fashioned charm, from the graveled paths to the porch swing on the wraparound porch, where several people were gathered. They looked at Beverly curiously as she walked to the door, wondering who she was. She was just about to knock when it swung open. There he was, his eyes widened with surprise. It had been 10 weeks since they'd laid eyes on each other. Before he could speak, she rushed out what she had planned to say. "Hello, Mark. Please don't be upset. Susan invited me, and I wanted very badly to see you. If you don't want me here, I'll go, but please, can I stay?" He stood for a moment before grinning. "Come in, Beverly. I'd like to show you my house, and sometime later, I think we need to talk, don't you?" He reached out, and she latched onto his hand like it was the only thing on this earth that would keep her from floating away. He flinched, but didn't pull back. He introduced her around, and many seemed surprised to hear he was married. She glanced down and breathed a sigh of relief to see his band still on his finger. Maybe there was hope for them yet. She finally let go when Susan dragged her away to gossip. They whispered war plans to each other, and Susan gave Beverly a hug with encouraging words. "You've got him a little off balance right now. Keep him that way. Don't give him time to think about the past. Keep him in the moment and his eyes on you. Be as affectionate as he will allow, but if you sense reluctance, back off. You need to get him used to you again, understand?" Beverly found it very sage advice and promised her. She went looking and found him out back. He had a massive yard, easily 4 times the land of her house, and it was meticulously groomed. His building stood shining under a fresh coat of paint and a new tin roof to match the house. When she saw him, she just stopped and observed. He came out of the building carrying an elaborate bird feeder in one arm and a small girl, 3 or 4 years old, in the other. She was hugging his neck, giggling and raining kisses on his cheeks. He was smiling, and it suddenly hit Beverly like a knife through the heart. She would never be able to give him kids. Now, at their age, it had dawned on her how selfish she'd been. Career had superseded family, and there was absolutely nothing she could do about it now. Beverly forced her mind to clear. In order to keep him in the moment, she had to stay in the moment. There was always adoption. If they got back together, her mind was clear now, the fog of power and arrogance washed away. If he still wanted a family, they would find an age-appropriate child and adopt, maybe more than one. "Who's your girlfriend, honey?" She didn't know if he caught the honey, but he smiled. "This beautiful young woman is Ari. We're good friends. I'm a little too old for her, but when she grows up, I see more than one broken heart in her wake." He set her down. "Ari, do you think you can carry this by yourself? If not, I'm going to put it on the table here, and you can get your sister to help you. And I didn't forget my promise. I'll be over tomorrow to put it up for you." Ari said hello to Beverly in a breathless little girl voice that made you just want to hug her to death, and toddled over to a stunning young woman, babbling excitedly and in on her hand. They approached Beverly and Mark, smiling. "Thank you, Mark. You don't know what it means to her. She watches the birdhouse you gave her for hours and was thrilled when a bluebird family took up residence. Plus, she's almost worn out the bird book you gave her. I had to read the names to her, and she's committed them to memory. We'll be going down the road, and she'll name them off: Robin, Bluebird, English Sparrow, Crow. Her preschool is so impressed they've organized a visit to the local aviary. She wants you to come too, if you can get off from work. We'll see if I can spare the time. I'd love to. I should probably go, she'll be so wired, it'll take both of us to wrangle her." The woman looked like she was still in her teens, to use the common term. The girl was built and wasn't averse to flaunting it. Her shorts weren't quite Daisy Dukes, and her halter top was modest, but it did nothing to mask the physical appeal. She also had the prettiest set of lips Beverly had ever seen. She nearly lost it when the woman put her hand on his arm and stood on tiptoes to kiss him. He glowed red, and Beverly was furious to see her lipstick on his cheek. The woman grinned at her, and Beverly knew she was being baited. "You must be his wife. I'm sorry, but after a while, we all thought you were fictional. I'm Marcia. Mark and I are neighbors." It took every bit of self-control Beverly had not to slap the smirk off her face. "Oh, I'm very much alive. I'm sure you'll be seeing a lot more of me from now on." They stared at each other until she smiled and sauntered off, putting a little extra swish in her shorts as she strode away. Beverly turned to Mark, pissed, ready to rail, and was stopped cold by a smirk. "Draw your claws in, Han. She's just turned 18, her parents were druggies, and one day they got hold of a bad batch and overdosed. She's living with her grandfather now, and frankly, he has no idea what to do with her. I like her, and I adore her little sister. Besides, it bothers you how, exactly? You haven't contacted me in 11 weeks, and had precious little to say for the 2 years before. I just assumed you wrote me off as a bad business decision and moved on." Beverly opened her mouth to say what? Instead, she just burst into tears and walked off. Damn him, why did he always equate everything to business? Of course, she knew the answer but couldn't face it. Susan swept in, shooting lasers at Mark, and herded Beverly into the bathroom so she could compose herself. Even as she snuffled, she admired the huge whirlpool tub, wondering how it would be to soak in it, especially with Mark in there with her. She took a few minutes, but she got her composure back, especially when she remembered he called her Han, something he hadn't done in, well, she couldn't remember, but it had been a while. She said as much to Susan. She asked, and Susan told her he had finally stopped holding his feelings in, but she took that as a good sign. I kind of deserved what he said, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. I came here to try and rekindle my marriage, and tucking my tail and running isn't a good start. So, Susan, stay out of it, no matter what gets said. This is like heavyweight boxing, so I'm going to take my lumps and keep swinging. Maybe I'll get lucky, or maybe you'll get knocked on your butt. Hang in there, honey. And if you start losing too badly, swing below the belt. Either way, you'll get his attention. Composed, Beverly went back to the party to find Mark sitting at a table with an older gentleman, Ari firmly planted in his lap. He started to stand, but she told him not to, taking a seat beside him. Ari looked at Beverly for a few minutes before reaching out and touching her pendant. The older gentleman spoke. "Ari, stop, don't bother the nice lady. Beverly thought she shocked both of them when she held out her arms, and Ari scooted over. Do you like it? Mark got it for me a long time ago. It's one of my favorite things in the world. Pretty, yes it is, baby. Maybe someday in the future, some nice young man who means as much to you as Mark means to me will give you one. If he does, cherish it. Remember, every time you look at it or wear it, who gave it to you and why. Now, if you promise to be really careful, you can wear it for a bit. Can you do that, promise? Her little girl eyes looked up at Beverly, a solemn expression on her face. I promise. Bev slid her up on the table, facing her, turning her back to Mark. Honey, a little help here. He seemed lost, not sure what to say. Beverly, you don't, nonsense, she already promised to take care of it, right, precious? Aha. Beverly felt his hand shake while she enjoyed his fingers on her neck, the most intimate touch they'd shared in months. She gently placed it around the little girl's neck as she giggled and sighed. She carried her into the hall, putting her in front of a large mirror so she could see herself. Ari clapped her hands in joy, which made Beverly smile. It took so little to make a child happy sometimes. After that, she stuck to Beverly like glue, leaving every so often to check on her sister, who was enjoying the attention of one of the young men from Mark's office. They were on his front porch in rockers, so she gently rocked and sang her a song her mother used to sing to her. She felt eyes and looked up. Mark was staring, tears visible in his eyes. He turned abruptly, walking into the house. She couldn't very well chase him with a sleeping child in her arms, so she continued to rock. A few minutes later, he was back, reaching down to get her. Come on, let's put her in a bedroom for her nap. She'll wake up a little full of energy. Beverly followed him into a bedroom where he laid Ari down, covering her with a light blanket. Won't it scare her to wake up alone? No, she knows where she is as soon as she wakes, though she'll let us know. They stood, looking down at the sleeping angel, almost touching. He turned to go, and Beverly grabbed him, pulling his head down to hers and kissed him, not a little peck either, but a full-blown kiss full of passion. He started a little, then kissed her back, giving just as good as he got. When he finally pulled back, questions in his eyes, Beverly put a finger to his lips. Don't think, enjoy. Then she kissed him again before pulling back and leading him out of the room. It was enough for now. Marcia met them on the back deck, questions in her eyes. She's asleep, honey. We tucked her in, and she looks to be out for a while. She looked at Beverly oddly. Thank you, you've been really nice to her. She doesn't get that much, odd really, Mark told me you didn't like kids. Flames must have been pulsing out of her eyes. How dare you share such an intimate bit of information? Before she could blow up, he spoke. That's not necessarily true, Marcia. I said she didn't want children of her own. She seems to get along fine with what few we've been around. Oh, said Marcia. Why didn't you want kids? Marcia, mind your manners. You don't know this woman well enough to ask such personal questions. Leave it alone. Marcia was immediately contrite. Apparently Mark was important to her. Sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. Something about the way she suddenly looked so young and helpless touched Beverly, so she hugged her unexpectedly. Hush, baby, it's all right. I know you didn't mean anything, so there's no harm done. Come on, let's get those tears dried and fix you up a little. Mark stood with his jaw hanging as Beverly led her away, back to the infamous bathroom. It was sure getting a lot of use today. She got a cloth and towel and gently patted her face dry, saying soothing words to calm her down. Marcia hugged her like she was afraid to let go. When she finally calmed down, Beverly had her wash her face, envying the smooth skin of youth. She wore no makeup, her hair in a simple ponytail. I'm all right now, we can go back now. Let's give it a minute. Let your ponytail down, and I'll straighten it a little. Marcia obeyed. Beverly sat her in front of the mirror, straightening out her tangles. Without thinking, Beverly started redoing Marcia's hair, putting it in an elaborate braid. It made her even more attractive. Determined to go farther, she used a bit of blush, a hint of mascara, and a light pink lipstick on her. Marcia sat silently, her eyes getting bigger as she watched herself transform. When Beverly was done, she would have looked comfortable on the cover of any teen magazine. Wow, just wow. What did you do to me? Beverly saw her lips start to quiver. Stop, you'll make your mascara run. I didn't do anything, child, it was there the whole time. You're a diamond, baby, you just needed a little polishing. Now, let's go back and knock them dead. That young man you were talking to? I wish he'd spent more time with you. I'll bet conversation almost stopped when they returned, and it wasn't long until there was more than one man vying for Marcia's attention. Beverly returned to Mark, standing beside him as he manned a grill. Were we ever that young? He smiled a bittersweet smile. If we were, I can't remember it. It makes you feel good, doesn't it, watching the young old mating dance? It does. And even if you don't, I do. One memory forever enshrined in my heart is the first time I kissed you. We were what, 19? I was still a virgin then. Boy, we sure got over that quick, didn't we? I think I knew after the first date we were destined to be together. What happened to us? Life happened. We grew up, our priorities changed. Suddenly, the thought of ducking out of work and spending the day playing wasn't as important as making a meeting or coming in early to beat the competition so you'd have a leg up when promotion time came along. Or you couldn't go on a spontaneous road trip because you had things left over from the week before and needed to finish them and start on the new week so you'd gain ground, good or bad. Beverly, we grew up, and now we're growing old. He stopped suddenly, but she knew what he was thinking. They were growing old and not together. She had to derail the train fast. Will you show me your garden? He smiled and led her over. It was a lot larger than she thought it would be, but it was just like him, neat and orderly, teeming with plants she had no idea what most were, and he named them off for her: black crim, brandywine, and yellow boy tomatoes, straight neck and spaghetti squash, Italian grey zucchini, French purple pole beans, butter beans, and bush stringless beans, poblano and cubal peppers. The flowers, especially the marigolds, are natural pest deterrents, and the mulch is to help retain moisture and enrich the soil. It almost completely eliminates having to hoe weeds. Ari popped up, done with her nap. She tugged on his pants leg, and he picked her up without a second thought. Pick, she said, pointing to a bright yellow tomato. Mark carried her over, set her down gently, and Beverly was surprised when the little girl took hold of the tomato and twisted carefully until it came off in her hand. She held it up to Beverly. Eat, Mark laughed. She wants you to wash it so she can have a sandwich. I've taught her not to eat anything until it's washed. I use organic pesticides, but there's still pesticides, and I want to be safe. Good idea. She held out her hands, and Ari toddled over. She hugged her as they walked, her back turned to Mark so he couldn't see the moisture in her eyes. Her maternal instincts she wasn't even aware she had, were surging strongly. Marcia came over, but Ari refused to leave Beverly's arms. Well, all right then. I'll help Mr. Mark plate the food. When she gets her sandwich, bring her outside. I'll save you a seat. She walked off smiling. Beverly washed the tomato thoroughly, found the bread and mayo, sliced it, and built Ari her sandwich. She sat and watched, telling her to put more tomato until the whole thing was on the sandwich. This is going to be messy, Beverly thought as she carried the plate back outside, Ari holding onto her sundress. Marcia had saved a spot between her and Mark, and Ari spent her time going from one lap to another. She ate half the sandwich, half a buttered ear of corn, and half a hot dog. It was still a lot of food for a little girl. Beverly was right, it was messy, and Marcia had to take her for a change of clothes. They sat under the party lights he had placed in the trees, watching the sun go down. She was surprised to see there was no alcohol. Mark told her privately it was because Marcia's grandfather was a recovering alcoholic. He left shortly after, though, and Mark pulled a cooler full of beer out, along with 4 bottles of wine. Not enough to get smashed for the amount of people, but enough to give everyone a pleasant glow. He had music playing, speakers situated around the patio surrounding them with gentle instrumentals and languid love songs. Beverly snuggled into Mark, hoping for the best, and he responded by putting his arm around her. She almost cried with happiness. Marcia and one of her admirers, along with Susan, were dancing, swaying together across the grass. Young love and old connecting in the soft lights. The music changed, a love ballad popular when they were in college. They had danced many a slow dance to that tune. Mark stood, pulling her along. Beverly had just enough time to kick off her sandals, then she was in his arms and 21 all over again. She held him as tightly as she could and soaked his shirt with her tears. One hand reached up to push her hair back and caress her cheek. They stayed together for a few minutes after the song ended. She stepped back, noticing Susan was standing with her mouth open while Marcia grinned. The tears started again, and soon they were in a three-way hug, all of them sniffling, which led to another trip to the bathroom. This was getting to be a habit. She started to fix her makeup one more time, thought better of it, and washed her face. The people left, thanking Mark for the evening. Marcia hugged them both tightly. She had a sad face when she pulled back. "What's the matter, baby?" Beverly asked. I wish you guys had been my parents. Maybe I would have the love I deserved, the love Ari is going to need. I'm scared, real scared. Now that I'm 18, the support check for me will stop coming. Ari will still get one, but it isn't much. Gramps is already uncomfortable with us being there. If the money dries up, he'll kick us out. Beverly was shocked beyond words, and Mark had an expression on his face she hoped she would never see again. Marcia, I want you to listen to me. I'm right next door. If things get bad, you come here immediately, understand? If I'm not here, lock the doors and call us, one or the other. We will be here for you and Ari. Say you understand. She was crying again and took turns clinging to them. When she finally composed herself, she left, a sad, slow walk until she was out of sight. Mark walked over to the porch swing, lost in thought. Beverly sat down beside him and took his hand. She may have been the big, bad CEO, but when things really got rough, one could depend on Mark to take care of it. What are we going to do about what? He asked, coming out of his reverie about the girls. We can't leave them in a situation like that. What do you suggest we do? I'd take them in a heartbeat if I could. Why don't you? I don't know how it would work, she said. She's 18 now, Beverly said. She's legally an adult, so she can live where she wants. Since she is legally an adult, she can petition the courts for full custody of Ari. I'm sure the grandfather would go along with it just to get rid of them if what she says is true. Here's what we do. I'll take charge of the legal stuff, that's my strong suit. Yours is sales, so you need to sell her on the idea of being an adult and doing what's best for both of them. 1. It looked bad, a single older man taking a young woman and child in. That stung. Beverly finally let some of her temper loose. You listen to me, Mark Waxman. You are not a single man, you have a wife. And she is not inclined to be referred to as the former Mrs. Waxman. It took all of this to wake me up, Mark, and I intend to never sleep again. I missed you so badly, honey, but introspection has led me to understand that what happened is all on me. I took you for granted for so long that I got used to it. I got bad advice, went a little power mad, and screwed my life up in ways I could never imagine. Tonight was the first step on my way back to you. Do you still love me? It took everything she had to ask that question, and she was scared to death of the answer. He looked thoughtful, and it filled her with dread. I love the you I fell in love with, not the you that you've become. If we manage to start again, things will have to be a lot different. I'm not asking you to be submissive, Beverly, but I would insist on you acknowledging me as an equal that deserves your respect and a good bit more than the time you've given me for the last few years. I woke up after I left. I have no desire at all to go back to that life, and I'm damn sure never stepping foot in that house again. I need to know in my heart that if the situation ever arises, you would pick me over the business every time. Honestly, I don't think you can do it." Beverly was crying despite her best efforts not to, and he took her hand. "Honey, all that being said, I'd really like to try again. I miss not waking up beside you, the affectionate gestures we used to share before you got too important. There are a few things we need to do though. The first is to find a competent marriage counselor who can guide us back to each other. We need to set some ground rules on how we allocate our efforts, making sure there's always time for each other. Does this sound reasonable to you? Would you be willing to live here in this house if we get back together?" It was too much. He wanted to save their marriage, he still loved her. She broke down, sobbing hysterically for at least 5 minutes while he held her, gently stroking her back. Eventually, she got herself together enough to answer him. He waited, wondering if she understood what he told her. He'd never accept second billing ever again. If she wanted to stay married, it had to be to him, not the job. Honestly, he didn't think she could do it. "I agree to almost all of it. I'm not worried about the house, it's nice, but without you there, it may as well be a box under an overpass. I'm sure the commute will suck until I get used to it, but if it helps save my marriage, I'll get over it." She sighed. "I lost direction, honey, and I want to find my way back home. I need a guide, and I'm depending on you. The counselor is a really good idea. Do you want to find one, or shall I? We'll both have to agree, of course, before we commit." It was a few minutes before she could go on, crying into his shoulder. She finally pulled back, wiping her eyes. "One of our first priorities should be to re-establish our intimacy. I know it's probably too soon for sharing a bed, but can I stay here tonight? I really need to wake up in the same house as you. As far as priorities, you are my main focus right now. I still have to work. Thanks to my blunder, I'm not in a very good position, so I have to really put effort into everything I do. But I will make sure I'm home at a reasonable hour. If something comes up that I absolutely can't walk away from, I'll call immediately. I'm willing to put forth maximum effort to ensure this never happens again." He believed her conditionally. Truth be told, once he got over the hurt that she had caused him, old feelings had started back. Most of their adult lives were entwined, and at the end of the day, he decided he didn't want to break them. He was serious about a counselor. If ever a couple needed professional help, it was them. She was saying all the right words, and he was curious to see if she meant them. "All right. You can have the room Ari took her nap in. It has its own private bath. And if you need something to sleep in, we'll find you a shirt, agreed?" She surprised him by shaking her head no. "I saw that big whirlpool tub in the master bath. I've been carrying around a load of tension lately, and I think soaking in it would do me a world of good." He soon heard her in the tub, singing softly. She had a really good voice, and he tried to remember the last time he'd heard her sing. He couldn't, so it must have been a really long time ago. It was one of her tells, she always felt extra happy when she sang. 40 minutes later, she came out wearing a t-shirt that barely covered her bottom. Bev caught him looking and grinned, flipping it up as she exited the room. He stood in shock at the sight of her bare butt, listening to her giggles fade down the hall. His eyes flew open, and the first thing he looked at was the clock, 2:30 in the morning. There was just enough moonlight to see her standing at the end of the bed. "Bev, I couldn't sleep knowing you were in the same house and not in the same bed. Can I please sleep with you? That's all I want, just to snuggle and feel your arms around me, please, Mark." He could have been an a-hole and sent her back down the hall. He could have done a number of other things. But he pulled back the covers, she slid in, and he felt her trembling. Wrapping his arms around her, he pulled her tightly to him. He felt the tears, but said nothing. Very soon afterward, he heard her breathing level out and knew she was asleep. He lay awake for a long time, wondering about their future before drifting off with a smile on his face. Her eyes popped open, and she wondered what hotel room she was in. Then she felt his arms around her, and it all came rushing back, she was in bed with her husband. She was about to get out when a bundle of energy came rushing in. "Mr. Mark, wake up!" Marcia stood at the door with her hands over her mouth. "I'm so sorry. I told her to stay downstairs, but as soon as my back was turned, she took off." Mark grinned, tickling Ari softly. She wriggled and giggled, loving every minute of it. "It's all right, Mara. Now I have two beauties in my bed. How lucky can a man be?" Beverly saw Marcia's expression and knew something wasn't right. "What's wrong, honey?" Well, Gramps hasn't gone grocery shopping lately. I was going to ask if I could give some of your cereal to Ari." She could tell Mara was embarrassed beyond words. Beverly's heart went out to her. She doesn't need cereal, honey. She needs a good breakfast. Give us a minute to get dressed, and we'll come down and fix something or take you out if he doesn't have enough, all right? Mara couldn't talk, she just nodded and gathered up a squirming Ari. "Come on, Ari, let's get you some juice while Mr. Mark and Mrs. Beverly get dressed." As soon as the door closed, Beverly whirled around, eyes blazing. "I'm sorry, honey. I was hoping for some long overdue loving, but it can wait, really. What kind of man doesn't make sure there's enough food in the house for his children? Where's your robe?" She snatched it off the closet hook and was out the door. They followed a little more slowly after answering the call of nature. She was in the kitchen with all of the cupboards open, frowning. Mark was about to explain that as a single guy, there was not much of a need to keep a stockler, but he thought better of it. Beverly didn't give him a chance, marching out to her car and getting the bag, as Mark always called it. One day, she was at a business luncheon, and a vendor spilled red wine all over her light blue dress. She had to excuse herself, drive home, and change. After that, there was always a bag in her trunk that contained at least 2 outfits. Choosing the most casual dress, she was back, telling Mark to get his butt in gear, they had children to feed. A very quick shower and shave later, Mark was waiting by the door. Bev was almost as fast, and he couldn't help but admire her. She always chose tasteful clothes, but was not averse to showing off her toned body. They almost didn't go out for breakfast when Beverly found out there was no car seat for Ari. But when Mark told her that they were less than half a mile from a really nice breakfast buffet, she decided to sit in the back with Ari until they got there. The girls consumed mass quantities. He looked at Bev and knew she had the same thought, these children were missing meals. Her eyes were dark with anger, and Ari asked if he was mad at her. Mark straightened his face and told her he was because she had eaten the last pancake. Then he grinned and told her it was a good thing that they could always get more. There was a mall across the road, and in a tone that broke no argument, Bev told Mark to pull into its lot. They were there for 2 hours. First, she went to a department store and bought the best car seat they had, banishing him out to the parking lot to put it in. By the time he got back, they were in full shopping mode. Bev made sure they both got 3 outfits apiece. Ari loved it, but Marcia seemed embarrassed. Bev gently hugged her. "Please let me do this. We never had children, and just once, I want to pretend I'm out with my daughters, doing mother-daughter stuff." Ari got bored pretty quickly, so Mark walked her around while Marcia and Beverly finished up. Their last stop was a grocery store, and Ari rode as Mark pushed, while Bev and Marcia discussed everything that they picked up like they were going to use it to cook the Last Supper. Ari contributed by putting everything she could reach in the buggy, especially while they were in the snack aisle. It was a quiet ride home. They were unloading the groceries when Beverly suddenly asked, "How many bedrooms do we have?" Mark found it very interesting when she said, "We 4." She just rolled her eyes, took the girls, and went upstairs. 10 minutes later, she called them. Mark found them standing in the biggest guest room, the one with the attached bath. "This is the girls' room. It belongs to them now. It will be their sanctuary if things go bad. You need to make sure Mara has keys so she can come over anytime, understand?" Mara was standing there, wavering between hopeful and scared. Ari was in Beverly's arms, almost asleep. Bev had that determined CEO look on her face. When he didn't say anything, he saw her start to tremble. Then he grinned. Well, so it shall be. I leave it to you girls to decorate it. He turned to Mara. You understand what we're offering you, as an answer? She flew into his arms and cried her heart out. Bev put a sleeping Ari down and joined the hug. He left them a few minutes later, going into the living room to sit on his favorite recliner. He tried to understand how his life had changed so much in the last 24 hours. Beverly came down a few minutes later, surprising him by joining him on his oversized recliner. Once she got comfortable, she started talking softly while gently stroking his chest. This changes everything, doesn't it? I'm going back to the old house to pack what I need. I'm taking Marsha with me to help, so you're on ANDA or childcare duties until we get back. Do not feed her junk, understand? Feed her something light to hold her until dinner. We'll be back in 3 hours. She stood, then stopped, bending down to kiss him. He could see the fear in her eyes as she spoke. That is, if you want me back. He stood and hugged her. We have a lot of issues to resolve, honey. Living apart from each other is not going to help solve them. You were always better at organizing things, so I'll leave it to you. This probably won't be easy, but I love you enough to try. Are you in? Was she in? What a stupid question. She was about to use every metaphor in the English language before she caught herself and smiled through her tears. I'm in. His smile gave her a lot of comfort. She grabbed Mara from upstairs and hustled her out the door. She was quiet for a while before she asked a question. Why are you doing this, helping us? She thought carefully before she answered. If they were to have any kind of relationship, she didn't want to start it off by lying to her. First and foremost, I'm doing it because I like you and honestly want to help you. You're in a situation not of your own making, alone and with a small child. What decent human being wouldn't want to help you? Secondly, you seem to be important to Mark and, by extension, to me. You know we were separated this weekend. It's hopefully the first step of a long journey home. She stopped for a second to gather her thoughts. One of the things I discovered while we were separated was that Mark really wanted children, and I was selfish enough to deny it to him. Then I met you and Ari, and emotions I didn't even know I had came surging out of me. Now, I bitterly regret my decision not to give him children. You girls are my do-over. I'll never be your mother, but I'd like to be the best mother figure I can be to you and Ari. No matter what happens between Mark and me, you probably don't understand, but I would honestly like to try. May I? Tears glistened in her eyes, and then she reached over and took Bev's hand. Well, then you can count me in on your campaign to get Mark back. After all, for a perfect family, both parental units have to be present, right? Beverly had to pull over. Mara held her while she cried, and she reveled in her touch. When she finally got herself together, she let her loose, kissing her softly on her cheek. Thank you, baby. When she called her baby, she started sniffling, so they hugged again. She hit her with a bombshell. To truly be my daughter, you need to live with us full time. Now that you're 18, you can petition the courts to transfer custody of RU. We'll pay for all the legal fees if you agree. It should be pretty simple, and when we're done, no one can take her away from us. You need to start practicing saying yes, Mom, now would be good. Beverly lost feeling in her hand because her grip was so strong. It came out as more of a sob than a statement, but she understood it as though she'd shouted it. Why, yes, Mom. She wandered through the house as she basically cleaned out her closets and dresser drawers. It took them for trips to get all the stuff in the car, filling the trunk and most of the back seat. You have a beautiful house, but it doesn't feel like Mark's. This feels warm, you know? Beverly did know. You're exactly right. I've lived in the cold long enough, baby. That's why we're selling it. I plan to never spend another night there. I find I love being warm. They came back with her car stuffed. Ari and Mark came out with her in his arms, and Mark asked Beverly why she didn't take her truck. She slapped his arm playfully. Now you bring that up. We'll use it next time. Think about what you'd like for dinner while we unpack. Mark thought he impressed Bev when he made a simple stir-fry using chicken breasts, zucchini, carrots, ripe bell peppers in yellow and red, onions, mushrooms, and chopped Brussels sprouts. He served it over rice with a surprise. He had taken parfait glasses, chopped up some tomatoes of different colors into little chunks, added basil leaves, and blended them with olive oil and a touch of vinegar. It was a very nice visual. Ari would have just eaten tomatoes if they'd let her. She had a bit of a temper tantrum and got her first experience with parental controls. Ari, do you want to grow up to be as pretty as your sister? Ari wondered where this was going, but she nodded her head. Uh-huh. Then you have to eat different foods. You like what this tastes like. It has a whole lot of things you already like mixed together. Beverly took a small spoonful and fed it to her like a baby. Her eyes grew wide, and she smiled. Mark took a shot at the parenting thing. That's more, please, and you should say thank you to Beverly for helping you learn something new, he said. Mara looked at Beverly and smiled. More, please? She ladled a little onto her plate with shaking hands and looked like she was going to burst with pride when Ari grabbed her hand. Thank you. The meal over, Bev took Ari to clean her up while Marsha banished Mark to the living room. Ari came back bathed and in pajamas, and crawled onto his lap. They watched a DVD Beverly had purchased while they were out, which was the movie Frozen, and Ari managed to stay awake for most of it. It became her favorite movie, and they must have watched it 1,000 times over the years. Marsha walked next door and was back in just a few minutes. Grandpa is gone, and the door is locked, she said. Beverly could see the steam coming out of his ears and put a hand on his shoulder. She grinned at Mara. Good thing we got you those pajamas then. Go get ready for bed. Mara bathed and came out in shorty pajamas that showed a lot of leg but were conservative enough. Beverly grinned at his expression. Only one of them is a little girl, honey. They were all in bed by 10, and both of them had to work in the morning. Beverly came out of the bath in a sexy little baby doll that did her figure justice. She saw Mark watching and twirled. His eyes went wide when he saw there were no panties. She giggled. It comes with panties, but I figured it would be a waste of time to put them on. You, sir, are 5 months behind on your husbandly duties, and I expect you to make up some of it tonight. Then she got quiet and said in a small voice, that is, if you want to. He stood up and slipped the gown over her head. In my opinion, you wasted time putting anything on. I love you, Beverly. Just like that, her amorous mood vanished. She was too overcome with emotion to be aroused anymore. He still loved her. He started kissing her, stroking her body in his familiar way, and she melted. It didn't take long for the fire to return. He was surprised when she grabbed a pillow. It's to scream into, baby. You know how much I enjoy making love to you and how loud I can get. We have children in the house, and I don't want to wake them, so I'll be biting this pillow a lot tonight. I hope so anyway. She didn't know how many times she bit down, but it was enough to put a hole in the pillow. She was glad pillows were pretty cheap, but if it cost her half her salary a week, it would be worth it. Their alarms were set, but Ari decided she would be their wake-up call. She was glad now that she made Mark put his boxers on and had slipped her gown on with the panties this time. They snuggled her for a while until Mara appeared and took Ari while they showered and dressed. They played with each other a little, but they couldn't get serious because of time constraints. Marsha had cooked breakfast, and they sat down to eat as any family in suburbia would. Ari insisted on a kiss goodbye, and they also kissed Marsha on the cheek, not wanting to leave her out. Marsha had a driver's license, so she took Beverly's car and dropped Mark off so they didn't have to swap the car seat. Beverly drove Mark's truck to work. Jen burst into the office 3 minutes after Beverly was seated. Does that truck belong to who I think it does? She couldn't help grinning. It belongs to my husband, if that's what you're asking. Now go to work, nosy Nelly. We'll talk at break. She bounced through the door 5 minutes early, bearing coffee and pastries. Beverly refused to say a word until they had their snack and were sipping their coffee. Mark and I are back together, JY. We have things to work out, and counseling will probably be involved, so I may miss a few hours now and then. It probably won't be as easy as I'd like, and there will probably be times when I'm depressed and snappy, but bear with me. I know I've probably never told you, but you're my rock here in the office. I'm most likely going to lean on you more than usual. That being said, I have approval to raise your salary by 7%. It's not a lot, but it's the best I can do. Thank you for standing by me. Jen was both elated by the news and saddened deeply. Her husband had just gotten a promotion and would be transferring to another state in 3 months. He was given the news Friday. His company had also helped line up some referrals for her, and she was flying out next week to spend a day doing interviews. They were both crying as she told her the news. I still have 11 more weeks, boss. I'll help you find someone new, someone who will be as loyal as I am. They hugged and went back to work. She thought about it on the way home, and as she pulled into the drive, it hit her. Marcia. She talked it over with Mark, and he thought it was an excellent idea. Ari was a bundle of energy, loving on both of them. She gave her a bath, sat down, and read her a story while she rocked her gently to sleep. She passed her off to Marcia and got comfortable on the couch while they waited, snuggled up under Mark's arm. She came back downstairs, and they called her over to them. Mara, could you sit a moment? We have some things to discuss with you. First, how come you're still here? Beverly said. We care a lot about both of you, honey. You know that, right? You can tell us anything. They noticed how unsettled she was all evening, but when they asked, the waterworks started. Grandpa threw us out when we didn't come home last night. He went into a rage. I think he's drinking again. He told me I had to go, but Ari was staying because he wanted the money. I came straight home and locked the doors. He won't let us have our clothes, our records, any of the things we need. What am I going to do? Beverly grabbed her and put her on the sofa between them. They both petted her until she calmed down. It hit Beverly that night as she was snuggled in their bed that Mara had said, I came straight home. That made her very happy. They discussed it as soon as she was rational again. First, you need to go to the courts and petition for custody right away, tomorrow if we can get you a lawyer. You'll give them this address as your home. The first thing they're going to want to know is if you can support her. Right now, you're unemployed, so that may be a problem. Have you ever held a job? Before Mara tearfully admitted she had worked at a few burger places, but not for very long. Mark had a small smile on his face. He knew how Beverly's mind worked and knew if she asked the question, she already had the answer. Well then, the first thing we need to do is get you gainfully employed. Fortunately for you, I have some openings at my company. You'll start Wednesday after you fill out the paperwork. Marcia did not continue to sniffle and instead asked in a timid manner, what will I be doing? It just so happens I'll be needing a personal assistant in 3 months. It requires at least a 2-year degree, so you'll have to take classes at night. If you fail or stop going, you automatically lose your job. I have faith in you, honey. Don't let us down. At long last, Marcia was able to stop crying, and Beverly and Mark immediately went to bed. Immediately after Bev had slipped under the sheets, he gave her a passionate kiss. Not that I'm complaining, but what was that for? That's for what you did for Marcia and Ari. You know we're going to have to arrange childcare for Ari. Luckily for us, Sol offers free daycare for his employees, so I'll enroll her tomorrow. She'll ride back and forth with me. Marcia will ride with you. Should we look at getting her transportation? After Vi had been quiet for a while, he confronted her and inquired about her thoughts. What are we doing here, Mark? We're back together, something I seriously thought wouldn't happen at times, and we're taking in 2 girls, something I could never see happening at all. Are we pushing too hard? I don't want anything to come between us at this stage in our life. Should we turn our backs on them, send them back to their grandfather, and wish them the best of luck? She tightened her grip on him more and more. Absolutely not. If something happens and we can't keep them, I will personally make sure they land somewhere safe. They're better off where they are right now than anywhere we could think of. I'd like to keep them as long as we can, please, honey. Oh, we're definitely going to keep them. Marsha's legally an adult, even if she's not prepared to function like one. Ari is the one I'm worried about. She's 4, and if we keep her, she'll imprint on us. We become the parent figures in her life. Are you all right with that? She remained silent for a brief period. 2 years ago, I would have run from them. 3 months ago, I would have waffled over the idea. But now, as long as you're part of the package, it fills me with great joy. I don't have any idea how to do it, but I'd like to try. It came out of his mouth before he had the opportunity to think. We'll make it, baby. Both of us made mistakes in the past. You should have given at least part of your attention to us instead of being so fixated on climbing the corporate ladder. I should have been firmer and demanded you remember that even if you were my boss at work, we were partners in life. These are mistakes I'll never repeat. I plan on being more open with my thoughts and a bit more forceful in my actions just to make sure it never happens again. I still think counseling is a good idea after the dust settles with our kids. We need to look into that. He was experiencing tears on his shoulder and was wondering if he had gone too far in his behavior. As he inquired, she responded with a playful slap on his arm. These aren't tears of sadness, they're tears of joy. I never thought the term "our kids" would ever come out of your mouth or that I would be so thrilled to hear them. They're the missing link, my love. We got so focused on ourselves, well, in my case anyway, that we forgot what life is like. Children force you to prioritize. Suddenly it's not all about you anymore, it's about them. I want to experience that so much now. Let's go to sleep. I have a daughter to train in the business world tomorrow, and you can make damn sure she won't learn the lessons I learned the hard way. You've got to enroll our baby in daycare here. I'd love to see the look in Sol's eyes when you show up with Ari tomorrow. We need to call out tomorrow, Bev, at least half a day. I'm sure Mara needs a wardrobe, especially since her grandfather locked her out of the house, as does Ari. I need to see Sol about daycare because technically, Ari isn't ours. Plus, you need to get her a lawyer lined up for custody. We need to move on that fast. Sometime tomorrow, I'm going to see their grandfather and see if I can get him on board with what's happening. It'll make the transfer of custody a lot less complicated. Agreed, she said in her business voice. And you were right about transportation, she'll need a car to get back and forth to school. We can do that in a couple of months after she's settled into her job. What kind should we get her? Let's wait 2 months and then get her input. No hot rods, nothing too expensive, a starter car. It should be something we don't have to worry about dinging. We just need to make sure it's safe. You're into the world, honey, you can handle that. Now we need to sleep. Lots to do tomorrow. When they awoke, they did so with a grin on their face and a plan to their own personal alarm clock. It dawned on Beverly that they would need to make sure the door was locked when they were in a close relationship with one another. She showed a giddy smile at the idea. Ari was completely unaware of the upcoming changes that were going to take place in Mara's life, and Mara was at a loss for what to think. They were hurriedly bundled into the car for a trip to the shopping center. She walked Marsha through the types of garments that she needed to wear in order to keep up a professional appearance, and she made an excellent selection. After that, she instructed her to select some clothes that were not suitable for work. There were a few mini skirts that she wanted to be approved of, as well as 4 or 5 pairs of jeans that fit her very well. Her wardrobe consisted of a few basic t-shirts and a couple of cute tops, and after that, she was ready to go. She was instructed by Beverly to select her own underwear, and she was instructed to take into consideration how it would appear when worn under her professional attire. After that, she kept her attention on Ari. She was completely awestruck by everything, but it didn't take her long to start giggling and smiling as Beverly made her try on a number of different outfits, including some really lovely dresses. At first, she was not a fan of the shoe store, however, after Beverly showed her a pair of pink sneakers, she eventually became more cooperative. Mark encountered them for lunch and made an effort to appear interested when they informed him about their acquisitions. However, they eventually gave up and decided that he would simply have to experience each of them individually. When Mark and Ari pulled out of the parking lot, they waved to each other and switched the car seat to his truck. When Beverly showed up with a woman who was young, Jen was taken aback by her appearance. She was even more taken aback when Beverly revealed to her what it was that she desired. See if she's trainable and if she has any business skills at all. I need total honesty after you work with her for a few days. If she's competent, she'll be taking your place. If she's not, we'll find her another position. As Beverly explained how she had come to know the girl, she became red in the face and asked, "Who is this girl to you?" Jennifer did, in fact, laugh. "I wish I was around to watch." "Does she call you Mom?" She displayed her photographs of Ari, the majority of which were taken while Mark was holding her. "Not yet. I'd like to hear it though, sometime in my life. I'm afraid she's going to be a daddy's girl." "The words I can deal with that, as long as I get the big one. It'll be easier with her," JY said with a fit of giggles that nearly caused him to toppling over. "Really, a teen as pretty as she is? What's going to happen the first time she brings home a boy you don't think is good enough for her? You better get used to sleepless nights." Beverly hadn't taken that into consideration. She was curious as to whether or not Mark still possessed the old double-barreled shotgun that he had inherited from his grandfather, and whether or not it was still operational. Marsha was so overcome with emotion that she simply followed JY around like a puppy. She was completely overwhelmed by the entire experience. They took her to the Human Resources Department and started the paperwork for her. She was hired with the lowest possible starting salary, which was $22,000 per year. Her perception was that it was a fortune. Beverly merely smiled at me. "Wait until you have to pay your own bills. It won't seem like nearly as much." She then saw Mara frown and hurried to comfort her. "Wait until you have to pay your own bills. That's yours down the road, honey. I refuse to let you move out until you have a degree at the very least. Then we'll see how you feel about it." She was quiet as she was making her way home. Beverly inquired about her morning and how she was doing. Marsha spoke once more, this time with a timid and small voice, replacing the confident one that she had previously used. Beverly glowed as she said, "It overwhelmed me, but I'll learn. Look at the role model I have. I may have made a mistake today." One of the other secretaries asked who I was, and JYN told them I was your daughter. I was so shocked I didn't correct her. The word is out. You may have noticed the strange looks. She had noticed them but dismissed them as unimportant. She anticipated that she would receive some strange looks because she was attempting to save the company in her ass. Don't tell them any differently. Maybe they'll treat you better. I could think of worse things to be called, and have been, she exclaimed with laughter. They arrived at their residence to discover that Mark and his assistant had prepared dinner, which consisted of grilled chicken and vegetables. They consumed food as if they had been forced to work in salt mines. When he explained to Sol why he was running late and what he required, he wished he had taken a picture of the expression on Sol's face. While she was in his arms, Ari's little hands were firmly wrapped around his neck. Almost immediately, he dialed Susan's number, and she must have sped up her arrival at the plant to a new record. She had that grandmother six handled perfectly, and before long, Ari was cradled in her arms while they were having a conversation. To them, he detailed the entire weekend that had been so wonderful. Ari appeared to be perplexed by Susan's tears, which caused her to appear to have a little bit of mist in her eyes. He made a remark about how the cleaning crew did not dust very well, but he maintained a smile throughout the entire conversation. In a very short amount of time, Susan was able to grab Ari by the hand and bring them to the preschool together. Ari was a little possessive and clingy because she was not used to being around people her age. However, the instructor was able to convince her to participate in the game in a short amount of time. A little over an hour later, when Mark left, she hardly acknowledged him at all. As far as he was aware, he shared his history with Susan and Sol, and he inquired as to whether or not they knew of any reputable family law professionals. Instantaneously, Susan put herself on the phone. Because she served on a board that specialized in helping children who were going through challenging circumstances, she arranged for a family law judge to set up an appointment for them with the individual whom she regarded as the most knowledgeable expert in the field. After the normal business hours, she arrived to assist them. In order to bring him back down to earth, Susan asked him some pretty pointed questions. He couldn't wait to tell Beth, she said. So, 1 week in with your wife and having these children dumped in your life makes everything all right? Not in the least, Susan. We have a lot of feelings and old wounds to sort out. The children won't make it any easier. We plan to find a good marriage counselor, and later on, if things work out, we may make a few visits to a family expert to smooth the path for all of us. I know this though, we still love each other, and we are also developing strong feelings for those two girls. You know how goal-oriented and driven Bev can be when she wants something, and she wants the whole package. I think this weekend has shown her what we missed out on by not having children and sees this as a chance to correct an old mistake. It'll be up to me to keep her real and balanced. It will be up to her not to return to her old ways. The first hint of that, and I'll be all over her. So, no, it's not going to be an easy path, but it's one we're both willing to walk. Sol said with a smile. Well done, Mark. I can tell you from experience, it will be worth all the pain and heartbreak that's coming your way. When you watch them leave the nest, stay the course, my son, and the rewards will be more than you can ever imagine. Now, go to work, you have a family to support now. Mark did put in a few hours of work, and he did not feel embarrassed to admit that he was extremely inefficient. Ari ran up to him and jumped into his arms when he came to pick her up. She went on and on about the things she had learned and the wonderful friends she had made. He was greeted with a smile by the director of the facility. Get used to it, she seems really bright, and it might be in your best interest to get her tested in a few years. It will be a challenge to us to keep her from getting bored. Here's a list of things you'll need to get. If you're uncomfortable with it, get her mother to give us a call, and we'll go over what you guys can expect. Have a good night, bye, Ari. She ruffled her hair and began to walk away, humming. It's clear that the woman had a deep passion for her work. While Mark was assisting his infant in settling into her seat, he inquired about her culinary preferences for dinner. It was chicken, she proclaimed. While he was grilling, he took a few of the toys that Bev had purchased and placed them in a location where he could see them. He made a note of the fact that she had a particular fondness for a stuffed dog, and he pondered how she would feel about having a real dog, considering that she was about to celebrate her birthday. As soon as the older girls arrived at their house, Ari joyfully ran to them. Bev picked her up and positioned her on her hip, just as she had been doing ever since the mother had given birth to the child. She did her best to convince them that she was going to school right now, where she would be accompanied by her friends and a kind lady named Miss Rose. Once he had finished kissing Bev, he turned his attention to Marcia and kissed her on the cheek. Ari accompanied them into the house, singing and laughing as she attempted to hold both hands at the same time. Get changed, girls. Ari and I made dinner, and it will be ready in 10 minutes. Ari followed them inside the house. Ari was one of the individuals who had changed into shorts and t-shirts when they reappeared 10 minutes later. The chicken was plated, the vegetables were arranged on a large platter, and the picnic table was quickly set up. Tea and lemonade were poured while the chicken was being served. During the previous week, Ari had just returned from attending Bible school at a local church, and she reached out and grabbed his hand. She uttered the word grace, and while he was expressing gratitude to God for the food and his girls, they all held hands. That was sufficient for Ari, and she exclaimed, "Amen," while pointing to the carrots that had been roasted by the oven. Through the process of chopping everything into small pieces, Bev assisted her with her plate. Bev embraced him that evening, following the routine of taking baths, reading stories, and rocking him in the rocker. It appeared as though she wanted to bring up something, but she did not appear to know how to do so. Bev, we promise to be honest with each other. If something bothers or concerns you, you have to share. Why did we quit going to church? Short answer, we got too busy and too lazy. Why? What brought that on? Ari, when she insisted we say grace. We need to find a church. It will look good when we have social services around investigating us. I refuse to go to a house of worship just to keep up appearances because I'd be afraid the roof would fall in. I agree. It would probably be good for both of the girls, but it would also be good for us. We could get involved in activities for people our age and get a new circle of friends. It could end up being a new support group for us. Let's talk it over with the girls before the weekend and get their thoughts. That apparently made her happy because she shimmied around a bit, and he felt her bare bottom up against a suddenly very interested part of his body. Her top flew across the room as she whispered, "Lock the door," as it flew across the room. Ari was upset that she was unable to enter the room, and she woke them up by pounding on the door. In the meantime, Bev slipped into her robe and opened the door to the restroom. He dove for the bathroom. Ari was crying, but she quickly calmed down as Bev picked her up and hugged her. No more locked doors, she told him the following evening. If we need time alone, we'll make sure the door is open when we're done. Got it? During the subsequent few weeks, they settled into a routine. Ari never missed a day of waking them up, diving on the bed for kisses and hugs while she chatted happily about what she was going to do at school. She did this every single day. Bev had been teaching Marsha how to apply makeup, and throughout the time that they were entertaining Ari, Marsha would get ready for work. In her business attire, and with her makeup done correctly, she appeared to be much older than 18 years old. That made Mark unhappy, to say the least. Bev would laugh, everybody knows she's the boss's daughter. There may be some interest. I would be disappointed if there wasn't, as pretty as she is, but it's a professional environment, and Jen and I watch her like a hawk. Still, she's 18, and I think that because of her home situation, she hasn't had very many dates. I think she'll be really popular when she does start dating. Did you ever find that shotgun? Yes, and I bought a box of buckshot. Bev continued to laugh even as she made her way down to the breakfast table. Following a period of 3 weeks during which the girls had been staying with them, the grandfather arrived at the house. After Mark and Beverly had left, he arrived. They had brought Ari along with them to the grocery store, and Marsha had remained at home to prepare breakfast and dinner. He knocked on the door, and when she answered it, he put forth the demand that they return to their residence. Marsha attempted to reason with him by stating that they desired to remain in the same location, but he became extremely agitated upon hearing this. It was possible that he had been drinking, she thought. Obviously, as soon as they turned Ari in for the night, she proceeded to tell them everything that had happened. Mark gave the impression that he would be coming over to talk to him the following day, but Beverly was able to dissuade him from doing so. "Let me call Mrs. Les, she'll know what to do." Mrs. Les was the family law expert that Susan had recommended. She was a retired judge who returned to private practice after retiring from the bench, taking on a very limited number of cases. Susan had recommended Mrs. Les. The number of clients she had at any given time was never more than 3, and she was extremely selective in the people she chose to represent. Ari enjoyed sitting on her lap and playing with her long silver hair. Additionally, they thought she was a person who was easy to get along with. In spite of this, she was as tough as nails when it came to the situation. According to one point of view, it ought to be relatively simple to hand over custody of the child to the sister. The woman is neat, clean, and quite pretty. She lives in a nice home, has a steady job, has no criminal record, and does not have any tattoos or piercings. As a result of your recent breakup, it is possible that things will become complicated if you two get involved. Because Mara is of legal age, you are aware that you are unable to adopt her. On the other hand, if you formally acknowledge her as your daughter, there is nothing that can prevent her from having her name changed to resemble yours. But on the other hand, you both have good jobs and are in a decent financial situation. Additionally, the fact that you are seeing a counselor and are willing to wait a year before beginning the proceedings ought to be of great assistance. The grandfather might be a little bit difficult to deal with, but if Marcia does not move back, it will be difficult for social services to provide him with a child who is 4 years old. There will be a negative impact on him due to his age, his history, and his attitude. You should make an effort to avoid upsetting him and give him permission to interact with his granddaughters in a supervised setting. Convince him that they would be better off with you as their partner. If he fights, then we will fight as well. Mrs. Les was informed by Bev about the incident, and Mrs. Les made a commitment to ensure that social services would conduct an inspection of their residence and complete the initial interviews. At the same time, they would go back to the grandfather and search for any evidence that could support the argument that the home was not suitable for those who lived there. Given his age and the state of his health, it is possible that they will be able to convince him to release them. There was a visit from social services, who conducted an inspection of the house and conducted interviews with Beverly and Mark. We'll see how it goes. In the meantime, keep an eye out. They had scrubbed the house twice, from top to bottom, in preparation for the visit, and it was clear that they were impressed with the house. Despite the fact that she was her typical outgoing self, Ari was unaware of who they were. Because she dragged them up to see her toys and stuffed animals while she chatted the entire time, they did not need to ask to see her room because she went ahead and showed them. They were then dragged outside to see her brand new swing set and sandbox, which she had just purchased. When Marcia was describing the atmosphere in the house, she maintained her composure and remained level-headed throughout the entire process. While she was telling them that it felt like the first home they had ever had, she found herself sniffling a few times. When it came to the grandfather, it appears that things did not go as planned. During the time that they were living with him, it appeared that Mara was responsible for the majority of the cleaning and all of the cooking. As a result, they discovered a dirty house with a sink, counter, and table that were piled high with dirty dishes and takeout containers. During their interview, Mrs. Engels gave Beverly and Mark the assurance that everything went very well and that the deal was pretty much finalized. In the following month, Mara was appointed as Ari's legal guardian, proving that she was correct. Mara finally took Ari to see the grandfather, who was accompanied by Mark, after the grandfather never bothered to come see them at any point. When they tried to enter the house, he slammed the door in their faces and refused to let them in. Ari appeared to be in a state of depression for a few minutes before he eventually became more upbeat and demanded that he be allowed to stand. They were squeezing each other in the enormous hammock that Mark had discovered in some location. Marcia, Beverly, Ari, and Mark could all fit inside of it because of its size. They were able to laugh at the fact that they were required to lie down. When Mark grabbed Beverly and flopped backward, Marcia would toss the Marie while she giggled and squealed. Mark would then grab Beverly again. After that, Mara would lie down next to Beverly, and the three of them would rock back and forth in a gentle manner. They were all put to sleep as a result of it. The moment that Mara asked Beverly if she could spend some time cuddling with Mark was one that Beverly would never forget. There were times when she discovered them dozing off in the hammock, with Ari tucked in between them. Beverly showed it to Mark, and he surprised everyone by rushing out of the room. Marcia posted the pictures on Facebook with the caption "Snuggling with her dad." Beverly took pictures, and Marcia posted them alongside the caption. The backyard was where she discovered him sobbing. He embraced her and kissed her passionately. He returned to the room and gave both of the girls a passionate kiss before saying, "I'm sorry, it's just something I never thought I'd see." He would like to say marriage counseling was a walk in the park and they only had to go a few times, but that wasn't the case. Their counselor was a pretty shrewd woman. She had them tell her in separate sessions why they split up and why they decided to get back together. She popped all her insights on them during the sessions. There were times when they shouted at each other and times they cried and hugged as if they were afraid the other would disappear if they let go. She would lead them along like lambs to slaughter, then prop them back up and analyze everything when they were done. It seems he harbored a deep resentment of her almost unilateral decision to not have children. She wasn't shy about trying to bring it up every once in a while. In the end, they learned a lot of things. The primary one was the fact that they lost sight of the marriage in pursuit of their careers. He found that while he was very proud of what she had accomplished on many levels, he resented it, especially when she started minimizing him as she climbed the ladder. She resented the fact that while he was a very good salesman, he didn't have the burning desire to get to the top. He almost laughed at that. If we were both like you, the marriage would have been over long ago. That set her on a crying jag, but after she recovered, she understood his point. She hurt him pretty badly when she said she felt he was too passive and she felt like she wore the pants in the family. Then he realized she was right about some of her feelings. It was only after she committed the ultimate disrespect to him that he started pushing back. Sometimes they'd come back still upset and not speak much. Ari would sense their moods and jump back and forth, snuggling until they were both in better moods. Marcia would hover, understandably worried about what would happen to them, until they pulled her onto their laps, and Bev would love on her. It was the day that he went to pick up Ari from daycare, and she came running up to him and said, "Daddy." He would never forget that moment, she yelled as he picked her up. She'd heard all the other kids calling their parents Mom and Dad and decided that was the way it was supposed to go. He told her after he got his emotions in check that if he was Daddy, then Beverly was Mommy. She seemed to understand that logic because she jumped down from the truck and ran to her, carrying a cutout dinosaur with little red puff balls glued along its spine. "Mommy, look what I made for you." Mark was genuinely concerned that Beverly might pass out, and then the tears started to fall. Mara and Mark watched for a minute, and then she turned to him and said, "Well done, Dad." After that, his tears began to flow. The dinosaur was displayed in a shadow box on Beverly's office wall until she retired. She stood in the hallway of their house, waiting. Mara stood by her side, holding her hand. It had been almost 2 years since Mark and Beverly started on the long road back to each other. This was the last step on the path. She heard the music start, and Marcia held the door for her. She was still thinking about the conversation they'd had while they were waiting. "Thank you very much, Mom. I am grateful to you, Dad, for rescuing us, providing us with a warm and happy home, and having faith in me. It's hard for me to bear the thought that I'll be a junior in college the following year. I assure you that I will perform well." "It's me who should be thanking you," Beverly said as she gave her a tight hug, attempting to prevent her tears from ruining her makeup. "After all, I have a heck of a role model to emulate. I had almost completely misplaced everything. My career was in the process of exploding, my husband had abandoned me, and I had nothing left that I could do. After that, I went to that cookout in order to have one more attempt at regaining control of my life. In addition to regaining my husband, I was also given a family as a welcome bonus. Have I expressed to you how much I hold you and Ari in my heart, as well as how proud I am of you?" Laughing, Marcia said, "Every single day. It will probably be another 30 or 40 years before I reach the point where I am sick of it. Straighten up that face right now. The time is drawing near." She walked through the door to the cheers and claps of their friends. The Reverend of the Episcopalian Church they had been attending for the last 14 months was standing at the bower, smiling. Their friends from the age-appropriate group they had joined were there. JY had even flown in with her husband and 5-month-old son. Sol stood beside Mark while Susan, dressed to match Marcia and Ariana, took her place on the opposite side from Marcia. 6-year-old Ari was standing there with a basket of rose petals, flanked by their 2 boxers, Sunny and Sugar. Each had a little pillow strapped on their back. They stood for a minute, enjoying the scene, before Mark slowly walked down the red carpet, preceded by Ari spreading rose petals. The dogs were in their usual positions, 1 step behind her. She got a big surprise when Ari handed Mark her ring. Mark had taken it to the jeweller's for cleaning and had a large diamond-encrusted band wrapped around it. She let him slip it on her finger, glancing at the mother's ring the girls had gotten her for her last birthday, the 2 different stones twinkling in the twilight. She let a tear slip down her cheek when the Reverend asked, "Who gives this woman away?" To which Sol responded, "Their daughters do." This was the 3rd most significant day in Sol's life, following the day he wed Beverly for the first time, the day Ari's adoption papers were signed, and the day she was given the opportunity to carry their last name. Mara broke down when he told her she would have to take their last name, giving her the papers. All she had to do was file them, and the Waxman family was complete. He grinned as he slipped the expensive band on her finger. It symbolized the old, with the original setting, and a new beginning with the upgrade. he already had the one for their 30th anniversary in mind. If he thought he had a surprise for her, she went up him in a spectacular way. Following the exchange of vows and the kiss, she beckoned for everyone's attention and said, "I want to thank everyone's presence, both old and new friends alike. There is one more thing to celebrate tonight." She turned and took both of his hands before saying the words that he had never in his entire life anticipated hearing. "Honey, you know I had a doctor's appointment yesterday. It was there to reaffirm something that I had already known deep down in my heart. Honey, I am pregnant. This is 8 weeks along. Despite the fact that I have no idea how it came about, I believe that it is a gift from God. What's more, it's a female." People began applauding and clapping, and he responded in a manner that it was impossible for them to have anticipated. He passed out. In the same way that Beverly and Mark had witnessed Marcia cross the stage to receive her college degree 10 years earlier, they sat and watched Ari cross the stage to receive her high school diploma that she had prepared for. Following Mara to the same university, Ari had graduated with honors and would be attending the same institution. During the time that Mark was holding his grandson, who was 4 years old, on his lap, Mara smiled at him. She smiled back at him while she was holding his twin sister. Regardless of whether or not he thought Beverly was an excellent mother, it was nothing compared to the way in which she adored her grandchildren. Marcia had inherited the house that her grandfather had built after he passed away, and she had remodeled it so that it was suitable for her and her husband at the time. On account of the fact that they had a gravel path that led from the back door to the back door, it was very simple to see the grandchildren. As soon as the time came, he had already subdivided 2 acres of land in between them in order to construct a house for Ari. He had also purchased an empty lot next door for the terrier that was wriggling on the seat between Bev and himself. Their daughter Haley must have been a tornado or hurricane in her previous life, judging from the way that she lived her life, being constantly on the move and always on her way to somewhere else. Ari, whom she had followed around as soon as she was able to walk, was the only person who was actually capable of calming her down. The very idea of her reaching puberty was enough to paralyze him to death. Perhaps the time had come to purchase a fresh stock of buckshot. When Beverly reached the age of 50, she retired and launched herself from the corporate plane with a silver parachute that had a gold overlay. She was able to save the company, and in a move that she claimed was motivated by Mark, she was able to lead it to a merger with the South Korean company that had invaded her territory. She was regarded as a business whiz for her role in brokering the deal, which resulted in a benefit for all parties involved. In order to supervise the merger and persuade her to take on another assignment, the chairman flew down to the southern region. He was admiring portraits of a green dragon with red ridge spine tips and another dinosaur that was not as easily identified as the first one. The dinosaur was yellow with blue dots. They were sitting in her office. "I'm sorry, sir. I'm entering a new phase of my life that I want to enjoy to the fullest. My youngest daughter just turned 11, my middle one is getting ready to enter college, and the oldest, well, you know," he said with a sad expression, "we missed the bus on that one. I still can't believe she went to work for the Koreans. Tell her if it doesn't work out, she and Jin will both be welcomed back with open arms. I'll pass it along, but I wouldn't hold out much hope if I were you. Jin really likes her new position as general manager at her new company, and Mara is having a ball working with their science. It's a little insulting when they trot her out to show how progressive they are for hiring American women and putting them in positions of authority, but she's proved her worth, and they really are impressed. The owner has his granddaughter working as her personal assistant for the time being, hoping she will absorb her techniques and skill." They both burst into laughter. "Well, I had to try. Good luck to you, Beverly. Send pictures of the grandchildren when you drop us a line now and then. Think about the consulting position we have on the table. You could work on projects of your choosing for as long or as short as you want. I'd hate to think I wasted all the energy it took to train you. It might break up the boredom now and again. I promise I'll think about it, and you know you can call or email anytime for an opinion. Thank you, sir, for standing by me. It means a lot to me." He gave the impression that he was embarrassed. "You were worth it. Goodbye, Beverly." She grabbed him up in a tight hug as he reached for her hand, tears dripping down the lapel of his expensive jacket. "Goodbye, Beverly." Immediately prior to her releasing him, he gave her a pat in that fatherly manner of his. She knew that after a year or so, she would be willing to consult for them on a part-time basis so long as the position was temporary and did not require her to take out extended absences. Despite the fact that she was really good at what she did, she was fine with it. In response to Hayley's wriggling, Mark looked at her and said, "Tone it down, HH," which was an abbreviation for Hurricane Hayley. She smiled at Mark and exclaimed, "It's about over." Mark recalled the time when he had learned that she was going to become a member of the family. Bev and Mark had made the decision to renew their vows to adopt their daughters as a way to commemorate the successful resurrection of their marriage and the completion of their family. This decision was made after seeking counseling and appearing in court to adopt their daughters. When she told him that she was pregnant at the age of 38, she said that she did not know how it happened but suspected that it was an interaction with some cold medicine. He was already on the verge of being overcome with emotions when she made the announcement. During certain moments, she was unable to look him in the eye, and he was aware that this was a deliberate choice on her part. He would have been overjoyed if she had simply asked him, but he had a sneaking suspicion that she was worried that he would decline her request. When he finally comprehended what she had shared with him, he passed out, along with all of their family members and friends. As soon as he awoke, she appeared to be in a state of complete and utter panic, with his head resting in her lap. He closed her mouth by pulling her head down and giving her a kiss that seemed to last a lifetime. She was crying and apologizing, so he did the most effective thing he could think of to silence her. Bev breezed through the pregnancy like it was nothing at all, and she continued working until he had a fit, which was 3 weeks before her due date. After that, she realized that he was content. He was always anxious, but she breezed through it like it was nothing at all. At the time that Hayley was brought into the world, he was present alongside Beverly. He was fortunate enough to be able to introduce their newest daughter to her, and he was awestruck as the little bundle wrapped her tiny fingers around one of his fingers. It was something that went straight to his heart and would remain there forever. There was a recording of the expression that Bev had on her face when she first saw her daughter, and whenever he was feeling down, stressed, or just plain old, he would pull it up and just stare at it. After every event, he went on to feel better. The grandparents of the children, Sol and Susan, were waiting with Marcia, who was holding Ari. Because they had incorporated them into their family so naturally, many people believed that they were actually theirs. Even though there were enough tears to fill a bathtub when they finally got the chance to go into the room and hold the baby, nobody seemed to be upset about it. As time went on, everyone witnessed the growing connection that existed between Ari and Hayley. Ari had only memories of them when they got her because she was so young at the time, and for many years, she was under the impression that she was physically related to them. As soon as she learned the truth, she was utterly heartbroken, but Bev was there to console her. "You may not be family by blood, honey, but you're family by love. We got to choose to love you. I, for one, was hooked the very first time I saw you and you played with my diamond necklace. As far as you're concerned, as far as we're concerned, you are our blood daughter. Nothing will ever shake the love we have for you. Understand? Nothing. Hold your head high, and be sure when you hear your name, Ariana Marie Waxman, that it was given by 2 parents who love you very much." Following Beverly's retirement, he survived for a few more years before he followed in her footsteps. Sol's daughter was undergoing a transformation, and he was not pleased with the path that she was taking. She had been depressed for a few months after Sol's passing because it had a profound impact on her. It wasn't until Bev showed up and made her go to lunch together while she told her their story that she was finally able to get over it. "When was the last time you surprised your husband with a night of passion? When was the last time you even had dinner with him? This," she said while waving her hand around the workplace, "is not worth your husband. I almost lost mine, and I'll never forget the feeling of pain or the struggle it took to get him back. Think long and hard, Amanda. You think Sol would want this? Hell no, he wouldn't. He'd tell you to sell the damn company before you lost your family. Think back, he ran the company for decades and hardly ever missed dinner with his family or any of your important moments growing up. If he could do it, you can do it. As a result of her hiring a sufficient number of employees and providing them with adequate training, she was able to delegate a significant portion of the day-to-day operations to them. When she was confident that they would be able to handle it, she surprised her husband by taking him on a second honeymoon to a tropical location with her. Every day, they made love to each other, and sometimes they did it more than once. When they were making plans to flee, she shocked him by telling him that she had stopped using birth control. A little over 9 months later, they welcomed their first son into the world. As soon as Beverly and Mark were free, they began working on their bucket list, which included all of the activities and experiences that they had previously stated they desired to try or experience when they had the opportunity to do so. They purchased a motorized recreational vehicle, RV, and spent a significant portion of the summers traveling throughout the United States, typically bringing 1 or 2 of their grandchildren along for the ride. Despite the fact that Haley would occasionally accompany her, she would rather remain with her older sisters. They then surprised everyone by spending a month on the island of CR, which was a major surprise. Following her viewing of it on a travelogue, Bev expressed a desire to visit it in person. After that day, they returned to their home country for a month, and then they traveled to Portugal for another month. Spain was the next destination on the itinerary, followed by Italy and then France. After taking stock, they came to the conclusion that Crete was the best option for them, and they purchased a nice house with 4 bedrooms and 10 acres of land. Grapevines, citrus trees, and even a couple of olive trees were included in the package. In addition to that, it featured a very nice swimming pool. They remained there for approximately 6 months. The 2-week vacation that Mara took with her husband and children was spent there, and Ari stayed there for a month with 4 of her friends after she graduated from college. When Haley graduated from high school, she was buzzing with excitement about the prospect of purchasing a house for herself and 6 of her close friends. The concept didn't exactly excite Mark all that much. Beverly, who was 56 years old at the time, was still able to rock a bikini when she bothered to wear one. Bev learned some of the local language, and one of her favorite phrases meant "let's get into the pool naked and fool around." Listeners, I would appreciate it if you could share your thoughts in the comments section below. Additionally, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel.